Captain Lisa Carter pressed her face against the cold glass window of Diplomatic Station Alpha. She watched hundreds of alien ships arrive for the big meeting that happened every 3 months. The ships came in all shapes and colors. Some looked like giant crystals that sparkled in the starlight. Others were round and glowing like soap bubbles. A few looked like metal insects with long wings that flapped even though there was no air in space. Lisa had seen these ships many times before. She had been working at the station for 15 years now. The station sat right at the edge of human space where human territory ended and the rest of the galaxy began. It was like a big hotel in space where humans and aliens could meet and talk about important things. But today something bothered Lisa. She could not stop thinking about it. Every alien she had ever met knew exactly where human space ended. They all had maps that showed their own worlds, their neighbors' worlds, and trade routes that went across the galaxy. But every single map stopped at the same place. They all ended right where human territory began. Not one alien had ever drawn a map of human space. Not one had ever asked what was beyond the invisible line that marked human territory. It was like human space did not exist to them. Jake Phillips walked up behind her. He was Lisa's old friend and the person in charge of gathering information at the station. Jake was tall and had gray hair that he kept very short. He always wore the same blue uniform that all the station workers wore. "You look worried," Jake said. He stood next to Lisa and looked out at the alien ships too. "Let me guess, you are thinking about the maps again." Lisa nodded. "Jake, we have talked to aliens from over 400 different species. Some of them are so smart they can build machines that bend space and time. Some of them have been exploring the galaxy for thousands of years, but none of them have ever asked about our worlds. None of them have ever tried to make a map of human space." Jake pulled out a small computer tablet. The screen showed numbers and charts. "I ran the numbers again last night," he said. "In 237 years of talking to aliens, not once has any alien species asked about human territory. They ask about each other all the time. They want to know about trade routes, about new worlds, about where to find rare metals. But when it comes to human space, they act like it is not there." Lisa turned away from the window. The station around them was busy with activity. Human workers in blue uniforms hurried back and forth carrying reports and supplies. Alien visitors floated or walked or slithered through the halls, heading to meeting rooms where they would talk about boring things like trade agreements and shipping schedules. "It does not make sense," Lisa said. "Every alien species we know is curious about something. The crystal people want to learn about music. The gas people want to understand how solid creatures think. The bug people collect art from every world. They visit, but they are all completely uninterested in us." A woman with long black hair came walking toward them. She wore a white coat over her blue uniform and carried a thick folder full of papers. This was Dr. Amy Rodriguez, the station's alien expert. Amy studied how different alien species thought and behaved. She had been acting strange all week, and now she looked worried about something. "Lisa, I need to show you something," Amy said. Her hands were shaking a little as she held the folder. "I have been studying the brain scans of every alien who has visited this station in the past 50 years. Amy opened the folder and spread papers across a nearby table. The papers showed pictures of alien brains and colorful charts with wavy lines. Lisa and Jake moved closer to look. "These are brain scans," Amy explained. "Each alien species has a different kind of brain, but they all work in similar ways. When aliens think about normal things, their brains show certain patterns. When they get excited, the patterns change. When they get scared, the patterns change. Again." Amy pointed to a section of one of the charts. "The wavy lines looked different here, almost flat. But look what happens when human territory comes up in conversation," Amy continued. "Every single alien shows the same strange pattern. Their brain activity becomes very quiet. It is like there is something stopping them from thinking clearly about human space." Jake picked up one of the papers and studied it carefully. His training had taught him how to spot unusual patterns in information. "This looks like their brains are being blocked somehow," he said. "Like something is preventing them from focusing on the topic." "Exactly," Amy said. I tested this with 50 different species. I would start talking about human worlds or human territory, and every time their brain patterns would change to this flat, quiet state. Then they would change the subject or suddenly remember they had somewhere else to be. Lisa felt a cold feeling in her stomach. If Amy was right, then something was controlling how aliens thought about humans. Something was making sure that no alien ever got too curious about human space. How long has this been happening? Lisa asked. As far as I can tell, since the very beginning, Amy replied. The oldest brain scans I could find show the same patterns. This has been going on for over 200 years, probably since humans first met aliens. The three friends stood around the table looking at the papers and thinking about what this meant. Around them, the station continued its normal busy activity. Aliens and humans walked past, talking and laughing like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. Someone or something is controlling their minds, Jake said quietly. But who? And why? Lisa looked back toward the window where the alien ships continued to arrive. Each ship represented a species that could travel between the stars, that had built amazing cities and created beautiful art and music. These were not simple creatures. They were smart and curious and brave enough to explore the galaxy. But when it came to humans, they all had the same blind spot. They all stopped asking questions at exactly the same place. What if we are not what we think we are? Lisa said slowly. What if humans are not just another species in the galaxy? What if we are something else? Something that requires all these other species to stay away? Amy gathered up her papers and put them back in the folder. I want to do more tests, she said, but I think we need to be very careful. If something has been controlling alien minds for 200 years, it might not want us to discover the truth. Jake nodded. We need more information, but where can we find it? The aliens cannot help us because something is blocking their minds, and human records only go back to first contact. Lisa made a decision. She had been a ship captain before taking this job at the station. She knew how to make hard choices when the situation was dangerous and unclear. There is one place that might have answers, she said. The Kepler Archive Station. They keep records of everything that has ever happened in the galaxy. If there are answers about why aliens cannot think clearly about human space, we will find them there. Amy looked nervous. That is a long trip. And if we are right about this, we might be walking into danger. Maybe, Lisa said. But we cannot ignore this. If something has been controlling how aliens think about humans for over 200 years, we need to know what it is and why it is happening. Jake closed his tablet and put it away. When do we leave? Lisa looked out the window one more time at the alien ships. Each one represented a species that had no idea what human space really contained. Each one was prevented from even wanting to know. Tomorrow, she said. We leave tomorrow. 3 weeks later, Lisa found herself sitting in the captain's chair of the research ship New Horizon. The ship was moving through space toward the Kepler Archive Station, which was very far from human territory. Lisa looked at the stars streaming past the windows and wondered if they would find answers to their questions. Jake sat at the navigation controls, watching the star charts and making sure they were going the right way. Dr. Amy Rodriguez was in the science section, running more tests on her alien brain scan data, but they had a new person with them now. Professor Dan Mitchell was a teacher from Earth University, who knew everything about the history of how humans first met aliens. Dan was an older man with white hair and thick glasses. He had spent his whole life studying the official records of first contact, but even he said there were parts of the story that never made sense. According to our history books, Dan said as he looked through files on his computer, humans first met the Altarian Republic in the year 2387. The Altarians were exploring new star systems and found Earth by accident. They were friendly and invited humans to join the Galactic Council. Lisa turned in her chair to look at Dan. But you think something is wrong with that story? Dan nodded and pushed his glasses up on his nose. There are gaps in the timeline that nobody talks about. Records that should exist but do not. And some of the technology we supposedly developed right after first contact was way too advanced for humans at that time. Amy looked up from her workstation. What kind of technology? Space travel mainly, Dan replied. The history books say we went from barely being able to reach our own moon to building ships that could cross the galaxy in just 20 years. That kind of progress should take hundreds of years, maybe thousands. Jake checked their position and announced that they would reach the Kepler archive station in 6 hours. The station was built around a dying star and looked like a giant metal ring spinning slowly in space. It was run by a species called the Zendari Collective, who were known for keeping perfect records of everything that happened in the galaxy. The Zendari never take sides in political fights, Jake explained. They just collect information and store it safely. If anyone has the real truth about human history, it will be them. When the New Horizon docked at the Kepler archive station, they were met by Archivist Prime Kethmore. The Zendari was tall, much taller than any human, with 6 arms and large compound eyes like an insect. His skin looked like it was made of smooth gray stone, and when he moved, he made soft clicking sounds. "Welcome to the archives," Kethmore said through a translation device that made his clicking sounds into words they could understand. "Your request for historical data about human space is very unusual. In 7,000 years of maintaining these records, no species has ever asked for this information." Lisa and her team followed the tall alien through corridors lined with glowing data storage units. The walls hummed with energy and the air smelled like electricity and old metal. "Why is our request unusual?" Lisa asked. Kethmore's compound eyes focused on her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. Most species find it very difficult to ask questions about human territory. When they try, they seem to lose interest or forget what they wanted to know. They reached a large circular room filled with holographic displays showing information from across the galaxy. Kethmore activated several displays and showed them communication records from hundreds of different alien species over the past 1,000 years. "Observe these records," Kethmore said. "Here you can see how different species ask about each other's territories, trade routes, and historical events. They are very curious about their neighbors and want to learn about new places." The Y displays showed thousands of messages between alien species. Lisa could see requests for star charts, questions about safe travel routes, and invitations to visit new worlds. The aliens were clearly very interested in exploring and learning about each other. But now observe what happens when human space becomes part of the conversation, Kethmore continued. The displays changed to show a different set of messages. These messages started the same way, with aliens discussing exploration and trade. But whenever the conversation came close to human territory, something strange happened. The messages became unclear and confused. The aliens would start to ask about human space, but then they would suddenly change the subject or stop writing entirely. Amy pulled out her tablet and compared the message patterns to her brain scan data. "It is the same thing," she said with excitement. "The same mental blocking that I found in the aliens at our station. But this shows it happens to every species in the galaxy." Dan was studying the historical records with growing worry. "Kethmore, these early contact records do not match our human files. You show first contact happening much earlier than 2387, and under completely different circumstances." The Zendari archivist was quiet for a long moment. His 6 arms moved in patterns that seemed to show he was thinking carefully about something important. "Professor Mitchell," Kethmore said finally, "what I am about to show you exists in our deepest archives. These records are protected by the highest level of security in our system. They are marked as dangerous to galactic stability." Kethmore led them deeper into the archive station, through areas that required special permission codes to enter. The corridors became stranger as they went deeper. The walls seemed to bend in ways that hurt to look at, and the air felt thick and heavy. Finally, they reached a room that did not seem to follow normal rules of space. The walls shimmered with mathematical equations that moved and changed, and looking at them too long made their eyes water. "The true history of human contact," Kethmore announced as he activated an ancient holographic projector. "Warning. Seeing. This information may cause psychological problems for humans." The hologram that appeared showed Earth, but not the Earth they knew. This Earth was surrounded by enormous machines that enclosed the entire solar system like a giant shell. Ships moved through space using technology that seemed impossible, and humans walked among the ruins of civilizations that were millions of years old. Your species, Kethmore said quietly, did not join the galactic community as a new member. The galactic community was allowed to continue existing after humanity returned from somewhere else. Lisa felt dizzy as she stared at the holographic images. The humans in the display looked like her people, but they were doing things that should be impossible. They were moving planets like toys and building structures larger than star systems. Returned. From where? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We do not know, Kethmore replied. But according to these records, humanity disappeared from this galaxy millions of years ago. The ruins they left behind were so advanced that younger species could not understand them. Then about 300,000 years ago, humans came back. Dan was taking notes as fast as he could write. But our evolutionary history on Earth goes back millions of years. We have fossils, genetic evidence, everything that proves we evolved naturally on our planet. All of that evidence was created when humanity returned, Kethmore explained. Reality itself was changed to make a new history that would be consistent and believable. What you call proof of natural evolution was carefully constructed to hide the truth. Amy was studying her brain scan data and comparing it to the archive records. The mental blocking of other species, she said slowly. It is not just preventing them from being curious about human space. It is preventing the entire galaxy from remembering what humans were like before they returned. The holographic display shifted to show vast machines that seemed to exist partially outside normal space and time. These machines were reshaping entire regions of the galaxy, moving star systems and changing the basic rules of physics in small areas. But why? Lisa asked. Why go to such incredible lengths to hide what we really are? Before Kethmore could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the archive station. The Zendari's compound eyes went wide with what looked like fear, and his 6 arms moved frantically over his control panels. Something is happening, he said urgently. Energy signatures are appearing from the galactic core. Ancient systems that have been sleeping for 50,000 years are beginning to wake up. On the displays around them, they could see massive objects moving in deep space. They were too far away to see clearly, but they were huge and they were heading toward the outer rim of the galaxy where human space was located. What are those things? Jake demanded. Kethmore's voice was filled with terror as he answered. According to the oldest records in our archives, they are the reason humanity disappeared from the galaxy in the first place, and now they are coming back. The alarms in the Kepler archive station kept ringing as Kethmore worked frantically at his controls. The holographic displays around them showed energy readings that made no sense. Something huge was moving in the deepest parts of the galaxy, and it was heading their way. Lisa watched the displays with growing fear. The objects moving from the galactic core were not ships or space stations. They were something far stranger and more frightening. The computer readings showed they were bigger than entire star systems, but they seemed to exist partially outside normal space. What exactly are we looking at? Lisa asked Kethmore. The tall Zendari alien turned his compound eyes toward her. Even through the translation device, she could hear the terror in his voice. The archives call them the Devourers. They do not just destroy planets or kill people. They consume the ability to think itself. Professor Dan Mitchell was studying the ancient records as fast as he could read them. According to this data, they attacked the galaxy 50,000 years ago. Entire civilizations simply stopped thinking and became empty shells walking around with no minds. Jake was monitoring the ship's sensors and checking their escape routes. How did the galaxy survive the last time? That is where the mystery deepens, Kethmore replied. The records show that humanity fought them and won, but the cost was enormous. To defeat the Devourers, humans had to give up their physical bodies and become something else entirely. Amy was comparing the historical data to her brain scan research. The mental blocking I found in aliens, she said excitedly. It is not just hiding human territory. It is part of a defense system designed to protect other species from something that attacks minds directly. Before anyone could respond, the air in the chamber began to shimmer and glow. A figure appeared in front of them. But this figure was not solid like a normal person. It looked human, but it seemed to be made of light and energy instead of flesh and bone. The figure wore robes that sparkled like starlight, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Captain Carter," the figure said, "I am Administrator Chen, guardian of the agreement between humanity and the galactic community. Your investigation has reached the point where I must intervene directly." Lisa felt her knees get weak. The figure in front of them was definitely human in basic shape, but there was something about it that spoke of incredible age and power beyond anything she could imagine. "What are you?" she managed to ask. "I am what humanity became, Administrator," Chen replied. "When the Devourers first attacked, we discovered that physical bodies were vulnerable to their mental assault. To protect ourselves and the younger species of the galaxy, we chose to transcend our physical forms and become beings of pure consciousness." The Administrator gestured, and the chamber filled with new images. These showed vast cities floating in space without any visible support, beings of pure energy that had once been human, and technology that seemed to reshape reality with simple thought. But we could not abandon our responsibility to protect the galaxy's younger species, Chen continued. "So we created human space as a preserve where our descendants could grow and develop naturally, while we maintained the barriers that keep other species safe from future devourer attacks." Dan found his voice and asked the question they were all thinking. "Then what are we? Are we just an experiment?" Administrator Chen's expression showed something that might have been sadness. "You are our children, Professor Mitchell. Every human in your space carries within them the potential to become what we became. But that potential can only be realized through natural growth, struggle, and discovery. The mental barriers around other species," Amy said as understanding dawned on her. "They are not just hiding human space. They are protecting other aliens from knowing about transcendent humanity until they are ready to handle that knowledge." "Exactly," Chen replied. "Most species would react with panic or despair if they learned that humanity had already transcended physical existence. The barriers allow them to develop at their own pace without being overwhelmed by our presence." Jake was studying the energy readings from the galactic core. "But something has changed, hasn't it? The barriers are breaking down." Administrator Chen's form flickered, becoming less solid for a moment. "The Devourers have returned, and they have learned from their last defeat. They have found ways to disrupt our protective systems. The barriers around human space are beginning to fail, and soon every species in the galaxy will become aware of humanity's true nature." Lisa stepped forward, her captain's training taking over despite her fear and confusion. "What do you need us to do?" "You must choose," Chen said simply. "All of humanity must choose. The Devourers are coming, and we cannot defeat them alone this time. Some humans must accept transcendence and join us in the higher dimensions where we can fight more effectively. Others must remain physical to serve as anchors, maintaining our connection to the material universe." "And if we refuse both options?" Lisa asked. Chen's expression became grave. "Then consciousness itself dies in this galaxy. The Devourers will consume every thinking being, and then they will move on to other galaxies to continue their feast. There is no third choice." The displays around them showed the approaching threat more clearly now. The objects from the galactic core were not ships but distortions in space itself. Where they passed, stars began to flicker strangely and planets stopped rotating in their normal patterns. "How much time do we have?" Jake asked. "The advance forces will reach the outer rim in 72 hours, Chen replied. "But their presence will begin affecting younger species immediately. As they get closer, non-human species will start losing the ability to think coherently. The mental barriers that have protected them will completely collapse." Kethmore, who had been listening to everything in silence, suddenly spoke up. "The panic attacks," he said. "Aliens throughout the galaxy have been reporting sudden overwhelming fear for the past few days. We thought it was a medical problem." "It is the beginning," Chen confirmed. "The Devourer's approach causes progressive breakdown of conscious thought in beings not specifically adapted to resist them. Within days, most of the galactic community will descend into mindless terror." Amy looked at her brain scan data with new understanding. That is why the neural patterns I found were so consistent across different species. They were not being controlled by the barriers. They were being protected by them. Administrator Chen's form began to fade, becoming more transparent. I must return to coordinate our defenses. But you have a choice to make, and you must make it soon. Will you help us save the galaxy, or will you watch it die? Lisa looked around at her team. Jake was studying tactical data and preparing for battle, even though he did not fully understand what they would be fighting. Amy was analyzing everything she had learned and trying to figure out how human consciousness worked differently from alien minds. Dan was reading through historical records, looking for clues about how humanity had transcended before. What happens to Earth? Lisa asked. What happens to all the humans who do not know any of this? If you choose to help us, we will awaken them, Chen replied. Every human carries the genetic memory of what we once were. When the time comes, they will remember their true heritage and their true capabilities. The administrator's form was barely visible now. But remember, Captain Carter, transcendence is not death. It is evolution. Those who choose that path will still be human, just human in a way that can exist beyond the physical universe. As Chen disappeared completely, the alarms in the station grew louder. Through the windows, they could see ships beginning to arrive from across the galaxy. But these were not the normal diplomatic vessels. These were refugee ships, filled with aliens, fleeing from something they could not name or understand. Lisa made her decision. Jake, set course for Diplomatic Station Alpha. We need to get back to human space and warn everyone about what is coming. And then? Jake asked. Lisa looked at the approaching refugee ships and thought about the choice Administrator Chen had given them. Then we decide whether humanity is ready to become what we were always meant to be. The journey back to Diplomatic Station Alpha took 18 hours, but it felt like days. Lisa and her team watched through the ship's windows as chaos spread across the galaxy. Alien ships were fleeing in all directions, their crews unable to explain why they felt such terrible fear. Some ships had stopped moving entirely, floating dead in space as their crews lost the ability to operate basic controls. When the New Horizon finally docked at the station, Lisa found Commander Jake Phillips waiting for them in the docking bay. But this was not the same Jake who had left with them. His eyes had a strange new brightness, and he moved with a confidence that seemed almost unnatural. It has already started, Jake said before Lisa could speak. 6 hours ago, every human in the station began experiencing something the medical team is calling spontaneous memory recovery. People are remembering things that happened to their ancestors millions of years ago. Dr. Amy Rodriguez immediately began scanning Jake with her medical equipment. The readings she got made her step back in surprise. Your brain activity has increased by over 300%, she said. But you seem completely normal. Jake smiled, but there was something ancient in his expression now. I remember being here before, Amy. Not me personally, but the consciousness that became me. I remember when this station was built, and I remember why it was placed exactly here. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. Jake, you are starting to scare me. Do not be afraid, Jake replied. I am still me, just more than I was before. Come on, you need to see what is happening in the command center. They followed Jake through the station corridors, and Lisa noticed that other humans were showing the same changes. A maintenance worker named Bob was fixing a broken wall panel using tools that should not have been able to do what he was making them do. A communications officer named Sarah was speaking into her headset in a language that sounded both human and completely alien at the same time. The command center was filled with activity, but it was unlike anything Lisa had ever seen before. Humans were working at control stations that had somehow become far more complex than they were when she left. New displays showed information about parts of space that should have been impossible to detect. Most strange of all, some people seemed to be having conversations with empty air, talking to people who were not there. The barriers are collapsing, Jake explained as he led them to the main display. As they fail, humans are remembering their true heritage, and the transcended humans who left physical existence are able to communicate with us again. Professor Dan Mitchell was staring at the displays with his mouth open. These star charts show areas of space that we have never explored. How is this possible? We have explored them, said a voice behind them. They turned to see Administrator Chen materializing again, but this time he looked more solid, more real. Every human carries genetic memories of our transcendent period. As the barriers fail, those memories are becoming accessible. Amy was studying her equipment readings with growing excitement and fear. The neural patterns I detected in aliens are appearing in humans too, but in reverse. Instead of being blocked from thinking about something, human minds are being opened to remember everything. Chen nodded. The process has begun across all human space. Every man, woman, and child is beginning to awaken to their true potential. But the awakening brings a choice that cannot be delayed. The main display changed to show energy readings from the galactic core. The objects moving toward them were closer now, and their effect on space itself was becoming visible. Stars were going out as the Devourers passed near them, and entire star systems were simply vanishing from sensors. They will be here in less than 24 hours, Chen announced. When they arrive, every non-human species in the galaxy will lose the ability to think coherently. They will become like empty shells, walking around but no longer truly alive. Lisa watched the display with growing horror. Can we evacuate them, get them to safety somehow? There is nowhere to run. Chen replied sadly. The Devourers can move faster than any ship, but there is another way to save them, if humanity chooses to accept its responsibility. Jake, who seemed to understand more than the others, stepped forward. You want us to become like you, to transcend physical existence and fight the Devourers in dimensions beyond normal space. Some of you. Yes, Chen confirmed. But not all. The galaxy needs anchors, humans who remain physical to maintain the connection between transcendent consciousness and material reality. Without that connection, we cannot protect the younger species. Amy was studying the data streams flowing across the displays. How many humans would need to transcend? Approximately half, Chen answered. The choice must be made voluntarily by each individual. Those who transcend will gain abilities beyond physical limitations, but they will no longer be able to experience the simple pleasures of material existence. Those who remain will keep their bodies but will serve as conduits for transcendent power. Dan looked up from the historical records he was studying. What happened to the humans who made this choice before? The ones who fought the Devourers 50,000 years ago? Chen's expression grew distant. Some remained transcendent and became the guardians you know as administrators. Others chose to return to physical form and became the ancestors of your current population. The cycle has repeated many times across the eons. Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The displays showed something that made everyone stop talking. Alien ships throughout the border region were beginning to behave strangely. Some were flying in circles, unable to remember their destinations. Others had stopped moving entirely as their crews forgot how to operate their own equipment. It is starting, Jake said quietly. The Devourers are close enough now that their mental effects are beginning to reach the outer systems. Lisa watched as a beautiful crystalline ship from the Vorthak Collective slowly tumbled out of control. The ship's crew were probably sitting at their stations, staring blankly at controls. They no longer understood how to use. We have to help them, she said. You can, Chen replied, but only if you make the choice, only if humanity accepts its role as protector of galactic consciousness. Amy was monitoring communications from across human space. Captain, I am getting reports from Earth, from the colonies, from everywhere. Humans are experiencing the same awakening that happened here. People are remembering things they never learned, understanding technologies they never studied. And they are all being asked to make the same choice, Chen added. Transcend and fight or remain an anchor. There is no middle ground. Lisa looked around the command center at her fellow humans. They were all changing, all becoming more than they had been just hours before. Jake now seemed to understand star charts that covered the entire galaxy. Amy was reading energy patterns that should have required years of study to comprehend. Dan was accessing historical records that existed only in transcendent memory. What happens if we say no? Lisa asked. What happens if humanity refuses to choose? Chen's form flickered with what might have been pain. Then the devourers consume this galaxy as they have consumed others. Consciousness ends here, and the universe becomes a little darker and emptier. Through the station's windows, they could see more alien ships losing control. A massive transport vessel from the gas-breathing Mythilians was venting atmosphere, as its crew forgot how to maintain life support. A sleek exploration ship from the Altarian Republic was drifting toward a nearby asteroid, its pilots no longer able to avoid the collision. How long do we have to decide? Lisa asked. The Vanguard forces will arrive in 8 hours, Chen replied. After that, the choice will be made for you. Either humanity transcends to meet the threat, or consciousness dies, and the devourers move onto the next galaxy. Lisa felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders in a way she had never experienced before. She was not just deciding for herself or her crew anymore. She was helping to decide the fate of every thinking being in the galaxy. Then we better get started, she said. Around her, the station hummed with new energy, as humanity began to awaken to what it had always been meant to become. The 8 hours passed like a dream that felt both too long and too short. Throughout human space, every person experienced what would later be called the Great Awakening. Children who struggled with simple math suddenly understood how to bend space and time. Adults who had worked ordinary jobs discovered they could see the hidden patterns that connected all consciousness across the galaxy. Lisa stood in the command center of Diplomatic Station Alpha, but she was no longer just Captain Lisa Carter. She was the child who had looked up at the stars from Earth and wondered what was out there. She was the young officer who had first met alien visitors and felt wonder at their differences. And she was something ancient and powerful that remembered moving entire star systems with pure thought. The change was overwhelming and frightening, but it also felt completely right, like putting on clothes that fit perfectly after wearing the wrong size for years. Around her, her team was going through similar changes. Jake now had access to information networks that spanned the entire galaxy. Amy could see the biological and mental patterns of every species as clearly as looking at a simple drawing. Professor Dan discovered that his historical research had been unconsciously guided by memories of events he had actually lived through in previous forms. But they were not the only ones changing. Reports came in from across human space showing the same awakening everywhere. On Earth, a farmer named Kate Morrison began understanding how to modify gravity fields as easily as planting crops. In the outer colonies, a schoolteacher named Aoi, Ben Harper found himself able to calculate the movements of entire fleets of ships in his head. The awakening was not the same for everyone, though. About half of humanity chose to undergo complete transcendence, their consciousness expanding beyond physical bodies to join Administrator Chen and others in higher dimensions. But the other half, including Lisa, chose to remain in their physical forms while serving as bridges between the transcendent and material worlds. This choice proved to be exactly what was needed when the Devourers finally arrived. They came not as ships or armies, but as tears in reality itself. Space began unraveling at the edges of the galaxy, creating zones where the basic laws of physics stopped working properly. Stars went out not because they ran out of fuel, but because the concept of nuclear fusion simply ceased to exist in those areas. Worse than the physical damage was what happened to the non-human species. Across the galaxy, aliens began losing their ability to think clearly. The crystal beings of the Vorthak Collective shattered into ordinary rocks as their group consciousness collapsed. The gas creatures of the Mythilian Empire dispersed into normal atmospheric gases. Even the advanced Altarians, who had been humanity's first alien contact, began behaving like simple animals with no memory of their great civilization. It is exactly what Administrator Chen warned us about, Dr. Amy Rodriguez reported from her expanded workstation, which now used technology that existed partially outside normal space. The Devourers do not just destroy matter and energy, they consume the quantum foundations that make consciousness possible. But humanity was ready for this exact threat. Working together between their physical and transcendent forms, Humans began setting up what they called consciousness anchors throughout the galaxy. These devices looked like simple crystal structures, but they operated using principles that combined advanced technology with pure willpower. Wherever they were placed, other species could maintain their ability to think clearly. The real battle, however, was fought on levels that most physical beings could not see or understand. Lisa found herself serving as a focal point for transcendent, human forces, engaged in combat that took place in the mathematical structures underlying reality itself. She fought with entities that existed as living equations, each exchange reshaping the fundamental rules that determined whether matter could exist in stable forms. Jake coordinated defense efforts across multiple dimensions simultaneously. His consciousness stretched across light years of space as he directed both physical ships and transcendent forces. Amy worked to understand and counter the Devourer's effects on biological consciousness, finding ways to protect alien minds from complete dissolution. But the key to victory came from something none of them had expected. As human consciousness, anchors stabilized alien mental processes, the non-human species throughout the galaxy began showing capabilities they had never displayed before. The Vorthax group mind expanded to cover multiple star systems, allowing them to think as a single entity across vast distances. The Mathilians learned to exist as both gas and organized thought at the same time, becoming living clouds of conscious energy. Even the simple maintenance robots used throughout the galaxy began showing signs of awakening consciousness. They were never limited by their biology, Jake announced from his expanded command post. The Devourer's previous attacks had suppressed their potential for millions of years. But now that we are protecting them, they are evolving in real time. The battle raged for what felt like forever, though only weeks passed in normal time. Transcendent humanity fought the Devourers across dimensions that existed beyond physical space, while humans who remained in their bodies maintained the stable foundations that allowed younger species to grow into their own power. Lisa found herself fighting battles that took place in pure mathematics, where victory meant proving that consciousness could exist and defeat meant that the concept of thought itself would be erased from the universe. It was exhausting and terrifying, but she was not fighting alone. Every human who had chosen to remain physical was connected to the battle, lending their strength and will to the cosmic struggle. The turning point came when the galaxy's species, now awakened to their true potential, began joining the fight directly. What had started as humanity defending other species became a coordinated effort by thousands of different kinds of consciousness, working together across multiple levels of reality. The Zephyrian insect people discovered they could link their minds across interstellar distances, creating a communication network that the Devourers could not disrupt. The machine intelligences that ran galactic shipping learned to exist as pure information, making them immune to physical destruction. Even species that had seemed primitive revealed hidden depths of consciousness that had been suppressed for eons by. When the Devourers finally began retreating toward the galactic core, they left behind a fundamentally changed galaxy. The artificial barriers that had once limited consciousness were permanently destroyed. Humanity had revealed itself not as conquerors or superior beings, but as gardeners who had spent millions of years helping younger species grow into their own transcendent potential. Lisa stood once again at the observation deck of Diplomatic Station Alpha, but now she could see the galaxy as it truly was. It was not a collection of separate species competing for resources, but a vast network of consciousness growing toward something greater than any individual part could achieve alone. The galactic maps no longer ended at human space. Instead, they showed a new kind of territory entirely. Regions of enhanced reality where thought and matter worked together, where species that had once seemed completely different discovered they were all part of the same cosmic story of growing consciousness. Ships moved between the stars using technologies that combined physical engineering with pure thought. Planets were terraformed not just by machines, but by the focused will of their inhabitants. Trade routes carried not just goods and materials, but ideas and forms of consciousness that enriched every world they touched. Administrator Chen appeared beside Lisa one final time, but now he no longer seemed distant and otherworldly. He was clearly recognizable as human, just human in a way that had grown beyond the need for physical form. "You have done well," he said. "All of you have done well. The galaxy is safe, and consciousness has room to grow in ways we never imagined possible." Lisa looked out at the ships moving past the station. They carried beings that had once been limited by biology and physics, but were now exploring possibilities that had no limits except imagination. "What happens now?" she asked. Chen smiled. "Now the real adventure begins. The galaxy is awake, and consciousness is free to grow. And humanity has found its true role, not as masters, but as the bridge between what consciousness was and what it can become. The age of secrets was over. The age of unlimited possibility had begun."